Julie's hair. It's growing, and I'm jealous. So
You're not jealous? Come on.
oh, I am jealous.
Oh, you are jealous.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just getting longer. It's true. Hairbrush at the ready.
I think it must be the History Museum influence.
Oh, you think?
I don't know, just
All the
talking out of
Alzheimer's?
bodily orifice. That's all. It's not my mouth, but okay, never mind. Okay, on that cheery note, we're gonna go ahead and call the meeting of the Committee of the Whole of the Bloomington City Council to order. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll? Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Mathey,
Here.
Councilmember Bolin,
Here.
Councilmember Milawambwe,
Here.
Councilmember Emig,
Here.
Councilmember Painter,
Here.
Councilmember Carrillo,
Here.
Councilmember Black,
Here.
Councilmember Crable,
Here.
Councilmember Bray,
Here.
Mayor Renner.
Here, let the record show how Councilmember Black was just like pushing his hair back, kind of like he was in a commercial of some form. Just saying, since we won't have him indefinitely around to harass, we got to get it all in the next few weeks. But at this point, Madam Clerk, we have public comment. Do we have anyone on the line or anything else to announce, Madam Clerk?
We actually have one person that is here in person. That is Scott Steimling. And then we did have one person, John Reed, who registered but is not present in the meeting. And two people sent an emailed public comment, and that's Herb Eaton and Pamela Eaton. So Scott Steimling in person.
Okay.
Thanks.
Hello.
He is just approaching.
This COVID-19 pandemic has been going on too long for half a year. Connect Transit, they've limited the rise to essential workers only. They disconnected fare collection and with dates that keep getting pushed back. Yet they say that if a private business would do this, they'd be out of business in a heartbeat, Terry, and you know it. I've seen 66 passenger buses of Connect Transit with one rider. But I forget they got free gas, don't they? At the taxpayer's expense. Nothing's free, Terry. Now they're running on a reduced schedule. In addition to requiring all passengers to wear a mask or face covering, you know, Terry, that the virus can only travel 6 feet. I guess that the city appears to have spent money for the scoreboard and this lousy television screen that you figure is free money again. Terry, I wish you'd get your life together. You know, people have just about had it. That the streets in front of my house are pathetic. But I've noticed the sidewalks around City Hall are perfect. They're all AD accessible and compliant. When is the city going to wake up and do something about these roads and about the cotton picking sidewalks? I've seen them where they are totally, absolutely. I've seen someone taking their granddaughter in a wheelchair and they have to lift it up over the lousy curb so that they can get it to have to push their granddaughter. I've seen the curbs at the street, they're level with the grass. You know, I don't know what in the heck you want. Terry, this is the city of Bloomington. This is not Illinois Westland. And, you know, I tell you, this council is absolutely pathetic. And I tell you, if this would be split 9 ways, I bet you would do something different, except you were there to please Tim Gleason. Basically, the city drop-off facility, I see you, Leslie. The city drop-off facility is there to serve the people and not for the people to serve them. You go in there and you don't fall in the hole. I wish all you people would wake up.
Okay, Madam Clerk, is that it?
That is everyone.
Okay, thank you very much. At this point, we're going to move to the consent agenda. Can you hear me, Madam Clerk?
Okay.
Oh, I hear you.
Yeah, we have yep, I'm here.
Okay.
The consent agenda, and then just so we're clear, the city manager said that he will do his COVID-19 update under his comments.
Okay. At this point, could I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented unless there are one of the items that need to be pulled, which are just minutes from our previous meetings?
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Emig. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Carrillo. Further, any discussion on this? I don't see any. So, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Mathey,
Yes.
Councilmember Bolin,
Yes.
Councilmember Milawambwe,
Yes.
Councilmember Emig,
Yes.
Councilmember Painter,
Yes.
Councilmember Carrillo,
Yes.
Councilmember Black,
Yes.
Councilmember Crable,
Yes.
Councilmember Bray.
Yes.
Okay. Motion carries. Thank you very much. The minutes then will stand. We move to the presentation and adoption of the 2018 editions of the International Code, Code Council Building, Residential Swimming Pool, Mechanical Fire, Fuel Gas, Existing Building, Energy Conservation, and Property Maintenance Codes. And the 2020 National Electric Code is requested by the Community Development Department. We have a brief presentation by the Community Development Director, Mr. Mart and Chris McAllister, and then a brief council discussion. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Gleason. Anything that you want to add or introduce here?
Well, quick, Mayor and Council, thank you for the opportunity to present tonight. After this presentation, given the input from council, this could be an agenda item at the first council meeting in October. This is something that's been in play for 3+ years. Quite a bit of community outreach has occurred, and we're at the tail end of this long process. With that said, I'm going to turn it over to Melissa. I think she had a couple of comments before the presentation starts. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Yes, so tonight before you, we have the update to the building code for presentation and discussion, and we look to bring that back, as Tim said, at the first meeting in October. There is definitely a need to modernize the building code for the city, and we'll be accomplishing this by updating to the 2018 International Code Council family of codes and other related codes. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Bob Mart, Chris McAllister, who've really done all the heavy lifting with this project. Thank you.
Thank
you, Melissa. We had a little technical difficulty in our offices. So Chris is actually in my office. We've been working together pretty much through this last 6 months, so I feel comfortable here. I want to thank the mayor, the city council, and city manager Gleason for allowing us to make this presentation this evening. I'd also like to acknowledge the work of Kerry Stedden. He's our Code Enforcement Division Manager, and Chris McAllister, our building official. I'd also like to acknowledge the extra work that was put in by the Building Board of Appeals. As you're aware, the Building Board of Appeals is an advisory board to the City Council. They are responsible for Chapter 10, which is the building code, Chapter 15, which is the electricity code, and Chapter 34, which is the plumbing code. I'd also like to acknowledge the Property Maintenance Review Board, who serves as the liaison for City Council on Chapter 45 of the Property Maintenance Code. And all those are within the city code. We've been working simultaneously with the Building Board of Appeals and the Property Maintenance Review Board over the last year to bring us to this point of adoption of the 2018 ICC family of codes, as well as the 2020 National Electric Code. The city of Bloomington has had building codes as far back as 1934. They were more local codes, But back in the mid 50s, they adopted the 1955 National Building Code in 1958. And that was our first step into adoption of model building codes for the city. Back in 2003, the City Council adopted the International Code Council family of codes. So that's our track record for adopting this series of codes. And the most recent adoption was in February 24th of 2014 with the adoption of the 2012 version of the codes. You may be aware that the building codes are adopted or are published once every 3 years. And that goes for the International Code Council as well as the National Electric Code, even though they're not simultaneously adopted. So that's why you're seeing that the 2018 version of the published code for the ICC and the 2020 version of the National Electric Code for the National Fire Protection Institute. I'd like to kind of go through, I have some slides if Phil could put one, the first one up, and kind of briefly go over what the our proposed adoption of the model building code would include. So the first code that we're suggesting we adopt is the 2018 International Building Code. This code is essentially commercial and industrial construction for both new and remodeling. It also includes multifamily dwellings greater than 3 dwelling units. The 2018 International Residential Code is related to the 1 and 2 family dwellings. The 2018 International Swimming Pool and Spa Code, this is something new for the City Council to consider. The current swimming pool regulations are within the various chapters, and so an inspector would have to go between multiple building codes to get the right answer. We are recommending that we adopt the new International Swimming Pool Code, which is essentially for public pools and spas, and that's something that we think is necessary to bring us up to the current standards. We're also recommending the 2018 International Mechanical Code. This is for HVAC systems, air conditioning, heating, and the like. The 2018 International Fuel Gas Code, which is basically piping standards and materials. The 2018 International Fire Code, which is fire prevention regulations. And the 2018 International Building Code, which is essentially establishes a threshold for what kind of the most recent 2018 code would apply to an existing structure when you're doing modifications to an existing building. We're also recommending the adoption of the International Energy Conservation Code. This is consistent with the state standard for adopting the most recent version or publication of the International Energy Conservation Code to meet the state code requirements. And we're also recommending the adoption of the 2018 International Property Maintenance Code, as well as the 2020 National Electric Code. When we had our initial meetings with the Property Maintenance Review Board and the Building Board of Appeals, they were adamant that we have a robust outreach effort. In years past, the community may not have been as actively involved with our development community, and that's something that they really push for, and that's something that we move forward with. So if Phil, could you advance that one slide for the outreach efforts? So we had worked very closely with the Property Maintenance Review Board and the Building Board of Appeals. We had several workshop meetings with the board, with both boards. We also, before COVID, we were able to meet with the local chapter of the American Institute of Architects to make a presentation before their membership and start the process of getting them understanding where we were moving forward with. We also had an opportunity to make a virtual presentation at the Bloomington Normal Association of Realtors, and that was in probably mid-March. We also attempted to work with the Bloomington Normal Association of Builders, or Home Builders Association. Although we were not able to make a presentation, we actively sent notices to their membership and to their executive board on getting those questions out and letting them see our website that identified all the significant changes to the codes from the 2012 through the 2015 and the 2018 codes. We also reached out to the chamber. And one additional step that was requested by the Building Board of Appeals and the Property Maintenance Review Board is that we sent notice to over 1,200 registered contractors and plumbers within the city. And we sent out roughly 1,250 notices to our registered landlords in the city. So we really tried to get the word out of our proposed changes to the code. You may be aware that we have previously adopted from the 2003 through the 2009, the 2012. We did not, for some reason, adopt the 2015 family of codes. Looking back at notes, I really can't find out why we didn't move forward, but this was a busy time for the Community Development Department in that we were working through the comprehensive plan as well as the zoning ordinance at that time. So I think that probably, and we were going through a transition in leadership as well. So I think that we missed that round of publication, and it made it our job a little bit more difficult to show the transition and the changes or amendments from the 2012 code through the 2015 and the 2018. But we were able to work with the Building Board of Appeals and the Property Maintenance Review Board to evaluate those changes to the code. So the current code includes some of those modifications adopted into the city code for each of the separate building codes. And those are in separate articles under Chapter 10. And that establishes a list of previously adopted changes to the code. Staff is now recommending, and so is the Building Board of Appeals and the Property Maintenance Review Board, to move forward with a new additional modifications to Chapter 10, Chapter 15, Chapter 34, and Chapter 45. And those are outlined and will be part of the ordinance adopting them. The majority of those changes are administrative in nature and do not impact the development community or staff in any significant way. However, there are a number of code changes that we would like to go through. And Phil, could you go back to the first slide, please? And I'd kind of like to walk through the overview of the changes that we're proposing. So under the International Building Code, we're not proposing anything but minor administrative changes. In the International Residential Code, we've looked at adopting a new appendix under tiny homes. And essentially what this new appendix would do is allow for some relief in residential stair systems, loft systems in houses smaller than 400 square feet, and also emergency egress issues as well. So that's something new to the community. And I guess what we should probably say is that currently the city of Bloomington does not have a minimum dwelling unit size in our residential districts. And so allowing this new appendix for tiny homes could spur some residential development and maybe deal with some of our affordable housing issues and redevelopment in some of our smaller lot neighborhoods. It's not something that would necessarily come into play on a neighborhood that would have restrictive covenants, but that's something that staff would encourage the city council to consider on that, adopting that appendix to the International Residential Code. One other thing in the International Residential Code, in the 2012 code, there was a requirement in a section regarding the residential sprinkler systems in 1 and 2 family dwellings. We worked closely with the Bloomington Normal Association of Realtors and again sought their support in how we should move forward. We believe that we should maintain the status quo on requiring a mandatory offer form. Essentially what a builder will do, he'll sign and submit a form that's also acknowledged by the purchaser. And then that form is submitted along with the building permit application. This system has been working pretty well for the city. We've actively monitored it in our office. What it essentially says, this form, is that although residential sprinklers are not required, the property owner or the buyer can ask for that additional service to be provided at an additional cost. And that, I don't believe that we have representatives this evening from the Bloomington Normal Association of Realtors, but they did speak to this item at our public hearings on September 1st. The other codes we want to have you consider is, again, the adoption of the International Mechanical Code, the International Fuel Gas Code, and the next one is the International Fire Code. And I would like to come back to that one. The existing building code, minor modifications, the same with the International Energy Conservation Code and the International Property Maintenance Code. So Phil, could you provide the slide for the International Fire Code? So there is a new provision in the International Fire Code related to requiring the retroactive installation of automatic sprinkler systems in Group A2 occupancies. So Group A2 occupancies are restaurants, taverns, fraternal organizations, and this specific code section, section 1103 5.1, specifically identifies basically entertainment-oriented businesses, whereby if you have an occupancy load of more than 300 persons and you serve alcohol, you are required to retroactively install fire sprinkler systems. When we had discussions with the Building Board of Appeals, they had very thoughtful deliberation on this item. But as far as staff is concerned, it's like flipping a switch. Yesterday, you didn't have to meet this code. Today, you do have to meet this code if this portion is adopted. So we laid out 3 separate alternative actions for recommendation through the Building Board of Appeals to the City Council. And the first one is adopting this section in its entirety. And I'll read this section. Where alcoholic beverages are consumed in a Group A2 occupancy having an occupant load of 300 or more, the fire area containing the Group A2 occupancy shall be equipped with an automatic sprinkler system in accordance with the section 903.3.11. That basically says, submit your automatic sprinkler plans, pull your permits, and install this upon adoption of this new code. We also looked at an alternative that would say, how about we amortize this, that we kick the can down the road, and we're looking at roughly a 3-year time frame for compliance. And so we added this amortization schedule to the second alternative, which was to automatic sprinkler system shall be installed by January 1 of 2024. The third option was to delete this section in its entirety. And that is the recommendation that both staff proposed and that the Building Board of Appeals landed on. Now, again, they were concerned about deviating from an established code, but they felt that this was not the right time for the community to absorb this retroactive sprinkler system requirement. In addition, the majority of these entertainment-oriented businesses are in their downtown area, which our fire response times are a little bit quicker. So that helped a lot take away some of the concerns. And the other thing is that they were specific in that they wanted us to reach out to those 13 or so businesses that would be impacted or could be impacted by the adoption of this specific section of the International Fire Code. We did send out notice to those 13 businesses on, I believe that was September 3rd. It was immediately after our special meetings, public hearing. And so far we've heard from the VFW and we've heard from the Ozark Restaurant. Staff has. I don't know if council has had any other outreach from those folks. Right now, I think that staff is comfortable with this standard. I think what some of the discussion we had at the Building Board of Appeals was this isn't the appropriate time, but when we adopt future ICC family of codes, that's the time to consider this incorporating or including this specific section. The other thing I'd like to briefly talk about is some of the amendments to the 2020 National Electric Code. And it mostly has to do with residential dwellings. So basically, whenever you install a new service on a house or you retroactively come back in and do your service, there's requirements for automatic shutoffs, exterior shutoffs for the service. That's something new for our National Electric Code. There's also a requirement for a whole house surge protection. So right now you might be familiar as a homeowner to have surge protection for each appliance or each electrical appliance. And the other one is, let's see, I'm going to turn to Chris. And some additional surge protections for new services that we discussed, and a GFCI for sump pumps and dishwashers. So there's some changes there, but I'll be honest, this department has never deviated from adoption of the current electrical code. So that's something that we would like to adopt in its entirety. But we did make the Building Board of Appeals aware of this this new provision in the National Electric Code, and there was limited discussion on this. We also presented that during our outreach to the Bloomington Normal Association of Realtors, and we didn't hear much back from that as well. I think it's just the change of technology and how the services are dealt with within the dwelling. So with that, just a quick overview of the building code adoption, some of our background, some of our back history, and then we would like to have maybe some continued discussion on this particular section within the International Fire Code. My concern is that it's time for this community to adopt the most recent published ICC family of codes and the 2020 National Electric Code. And I'd hate to have those efforts of both staff and our boards and commissions kind of jeopardized by one section of the code that we have made everyone aware of. So with that, I'll take a step back. Chris McAllister is in my office, and we'll be happy to switch seats and answer some questions as they come from council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Mark. At this point, we're going to go ahead and start the council discussion. It's up to about 15 minutes. I'm trying to, okay, here we go. Sorry. We have, anybody want to start with questions or comments, suggestions, et cetera? I'm going to go ahead and start with the Councilmember Matthey, and we're going to keep going. Matthey and Craybill, Emig, let's start there.
Thanks, Mayor. Bob, just a couple of clarification questions. You were talking about the sprinklers for the 1 and 2 bedroom dwelling units. Right. And you said that you guys reached out and talked to the Association of Realtors. What was the fire department's input on that conversation as well?
We had a discussion with Chief Moore, and he knew that this wasn't a political fight that we should deal with right now. I will also say that most all the municipalities throughout the state of Illinois have deleted that section or found some way around that section for automatic sprinkler systems. And both Chief and I agree that we could maintain the status quo for that automatic sprinkler system in 1 and 2 family dwellings. So I'm just curious, just a spitballing idea. It sounds right now like the form is almost an opt-in form. What happens if that's reversed and it's changed to an opt-out form? So that a
a purchaser has to actually sign that no, that they don't want the sprinkler in their house, that thereby making like the default would be the opt-in kind of option where the sprinklers are going to go in.
Yeah. That's not the way our program is right now, or our process is right now. The form is within our municipal code as an amendment to that article for adoption of the International Residential Code. It's pretty straightforward. And we have been consistently accepting those as part of our building permit issuance. In just looking at the trends of the community right now, over the last couple of years, we haven't had but, you know, 1 or 2, maybe up to 5 residential dwelling, 1 and 2 family dwellings. We're going gangbusters now. We're probably up to 40 a year. So the trends are changing. I think that form works good. I think the builders are aware of it. I think those conscientious homeowners or home purchasers also look at that and whether or not they need that extra protection of an automatic sprinkler system. But the majority of the forms that come in actually do not include residential sprinkler systems.
Okay.
And I'm turning to Chris, and he's shaking his head that the trend is not for them to install the automatic sprinkler system.
Okay, changing topics then to the electrical code. You were talking about the changes to the electrical code. The portion at the end was only if somebody was upgrading a service on an existing building, then they would have to have the whole house surge protector put in.
It would be for new services and for upgrades of existing service panels. I can leave you with Chris for a second. You want to take this one? And he can kind of explain a little bit better.
Yes, the surge protection is actually, I think it became actually a part of the 2017 code. We've actually, again, jumped a series of codes by not adopting them in this last go around. But whole house surge protection is something that would apply to both new construction and upgraded services.
Okay. Yeah, I'm actually happy to see that in there because, you know, most people know to protect their computer with a surge protector or their TV or stuff like that, but it's actually a lot more expensive to have your refrigerator blown up than it is other things. And, you know, anybody who doesn't know what a whole house surge protector is, it literally gets installed in the electrical panel of your house. And I had one put in, and I think it was $250 installed by an electrician. So, and with the number of lightning strikes that we have in this area that can travel a half mile down the road across power lines, especially in the older parts of town where we have, you know, poles instead of buried electrical services, highly recommend those. So I'm actually happy to see that in there. So yeah, I fully support that part of it. So thank you guys very much for all the work you guys are doing on this.
Great.
Thank you.
Councilmember Craybill and then Emick.
Yeah, thank you, Bob and Chris for all the work on this, and thank you, Jamie. I think I'm going to call an electrician tomorrow to get one installed in my house. So what I wanted to focus on is the International Energy Conservation Code. You know, what I understand and reading and looking this up, that the 2018 code doesn't differ much from the 2012 code with regard to energy efficiency. But I do know that they are looking to finalize or have finalized the 2021 code, which is supposed to increase efficiency by up to 10% over the 2018 standards, and also have a zero code for developers of commercial, institutional type of buildings where all the energy has to come from renewable sources. So I guess my questions on that, Bob, would be, you know, with the adoption of the 2018 Energy Efficiency Code, is there really much increase in efficiency for new construction?
This might have to be piggyback with Chris, but there are minimum insulation values related to 1 and 2 family dwellings as well as commercial structures.
It's a progressive increase. But
yeah, I would say Chris is telling me that it's a progressive increase in the standards or the code. I'm comfortable with adoption of the 2018 code. We haven't even seen the 2021 code. It's typical, or generally a community will adopt the most recent code and give a little lag time, maybe 1 or 2 years, to find out what those changes are to the code and not be the guinea pig of adoption. So
This is the state code though.
the international code would be
The energy code.
Yeah,
So.
why don't you answer
Yeah,
this?
so, sorry to interrupt there. The energy codes is somewhat unique in Illinois. Basically, what it comes down to is the state of Illinois has adopted the 2018 Illinois Energy Conservation Code, which is mostly a slight modification of the 2018 International Energy Conservation Code. But in that adoption process, they place the requirements that state that if a municipality enforces energy efficiency standards at all, they have to enforce the 2018 Illinois as the minimum standard. So that is a little bit unique. I'm assuming that Illinois will also adopt the 2021 when it comes about, but as Bob mentioned, I've not seen the actual requirements on that.
So Chris, you're saying that that Illinois, the state would not allow us to adopt a more, I guess, the 2021 code until the state adopts it. Is that what you're saying?
It may allow us to adopt the 2021. They also have a little bit of distinction between residences and commercial construction. I believe that in commercial construction, they will allow you to adopt a stricter standard. But I believe in residential, they will not allow you to enforce anything that's either less or more restrictive.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, we're going to move to Councilmember Emig, and then after that, I may need an extension on discussion time because we're almost out of time. Councilmember Emig.
Yes, thank you for all of that information. My question is to confirm that you anticipate the next ICC codes to be amended, specifically the fire safety code, to be amended in 2021, or do you know what that timeline would be?
Probably the next published version.
Yeah, so the International Code Council basically publishes a new cycle every 3 years.
Okay.
As Bob kind of mentioned, there's often a little bit of a lag when municipalities actually adopt those codes so they can kind of get the kinks worked out, as he mentioned. I think that we weren't trying to make too many modifications to the code. I think that perhaps what you were referring to in Bob's comments were the modification to the fire code.
Mm-hmm.
And our feeling was that in 2021, it might be a better time to look at the retroactive requirements for those A2 occupancies.
Understood. And that's in large part due to the hardship caused by COVID? Or
Yes, yes. And
okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. That's all I have.
Councilmember Bolin. Donna.
Yeah, I'm here. I guess one of the questions, just for clarity, are things grandfathered? I know that when you have to remodel something, you usually have to bring it up to the new code, but if it's not remodeled, are you allowed to grandfather what you have?
Yeah, Chris wants to take this one.
Yeah, so it's a little bit of a complicated technical question. I would say for the most part, buildings need to comply with the standard to which they were built to at the time.
Okay.
With that being said, the International Fire Code in particular, as the Fire Prevention Code, has some minimum standards that apply to existing buildings. Those standards are fairly limited, but they are retroactive. As you mentioned, any new construction or any remodeling of existing construction does need to comply with the new either the building code or existing building code.
Okay, the only other question you had mentioned in the fire code, 300 people occupancy, and that most of the buildings are entities that are located downtown. What about hotels that would be, let's say, the DoubleTree? Is that already within the new code, or
Yeah,
does
so
it have to be?
there are some other facilities that do meet the occupancy and the serving alcohol requirement, but the majority of those are already sprinkled.
Okay,
Or
okay. Thank you.
Okay,
So
thank you.
through our research-
Councilmember Carrillo.
It was roughly 13.
Council, Jen Carrillo.
Yes, thank you. Do you want me to make a motion to extend?
It depends on how, we're not over quite yet. So you go ahead.
Okay, so I got just two quick constituent questions in regards to code. So were required carbon monoxide detectors and gender neutral bathrooms considered as part of this set of code amendments?
yep, Bob, for that one.
So I believe it was last year in the late winter, early spring, we did go before the Property Maintenance Review Board for the adoption of carbon monoxide or smoke detectors in the, and so that is now part of our property maintenance code. The other question was.
So to be clear, carbon monoxide detectors are still not a requirement.
That's correct. It was the smoke detect.
I think it would depend, is that a retroactive enforcement question or for our new facilities or new residences?
I guess either, yeah. I'm just curious about whether that topic is covered in this set of updates. I had a lot of questions about carbon monoxide detector requirements and why those aren't required as part of.
I believe they are for residential units as both a state requirement and the last couple series of the codes, but I'd have to actually look at that.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, so the other question is, were gender neutral bathrooms covered or discussed as part of this set of code amendments?
It's part, we only adopt the Illinois State Plumbing Code, so we didn't get into that.
Yeah, so the plumbing code doesn't really address the gender neutral aspect of it. It basically determines the number of plumbing fixtures and how they need to be installed and things like that. As a part of this, again, it's another state code, is the Illinois Accessibility Code, which really kind of governs the requirements on that type of thing about the number of restrooms and the accessibility and what needs to be provided in those restrooms in terms of the number of facilities for each sex and the allowability of unisex restrooms. But I'm not sure about the specifics of, yeah.
Gotcha. So if we wanted to go above and beyond whatever is in the code, then that's something that this council would need to legislate.
Yes.
I mean, are we able to decide that we want to make that a part of our code requirement? Or does
that's something for legal can chime in on that.
Jeff, are you on?
Yes. There was actually a law that was passed last year. I don't remember if it was just for places that are open to the public that does require gender neutral bathrooms. We'd have to look at the ability to do that for private businesses.
Okay.
And whether or not that law covers that, but we can look at that.
Yeah, that would just be those are just topics that I got reached out to around and would be interested in whether those discussions were had and where we landed on those. I guess my last question is in terms of inspectors as we, I guess, get ready to start another budget planning process. Want to talk about as we are making these updates to the code, what is our staff capacity for actually being able to enforce these code changes, and then what do you need from us as a council in order to be able to make sure that that happens?
So do we, as a part of their certifications, the inspectors themselves kind of go through an ongoing continuing education requirements. So for their credentials, they need to get continuing education, and often as a part of that process, learning about the nuances of the new codes is part of that. We do have a number of books and things that we've acquired as a process here to understand the changes of the codes ourselves, which will be obviously available to them, but I would certainly encourage additional educational opportunities.
I think last I heard we have 2 staff inspectors, right?
I can answer those questions. We have 2 residential property inspectors. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
For the property maintenance or the rental property program?
Mhm. Yeah, so I guess my question is, I don't know if you know this number off the top of your head, but with those 2 inspectors, how often are residential properties actually being inspected? Yeah.
Well, we have roughly 12,000 rental dwelling units within the community, over 3,000 separate properties. Our cycle is that we're getting through them roughly in a 3-year program or system with those 2 inspectors. And they pull from an inspection pool that cycles over that 3-year period.
So once every 3 years?
Essentially, yes.
Okay.
If there's a substantial complaints, then the community development director or economic and community development director can authorize an inspection, and we do that often. If there's an increase in complaints that are received. So it doesn't mean that they're steadfast in that cycle. If we hear complaints, then we're going to go in and schedule that residential inspection.
Gotcha. Thank you so much for your presentation, and thanks for answering.
Jenna, I'm going to take you up on your offer because we're over time. Can we have an offer to extend it by 5 minutes, please?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to extend it by 5 minutes.
Is there a second?
Jamie is saying.
Jamie's okay. Jamie, second. Okay, Madam Clerk, would you call the roll to extend this by 5 minutes?
Is that a yes? Councilmember Boland.
Oh, yes.
I'm a yes.
Thanks. Councilmember Miller-Wambwe.
Yes.
Councilmember Emig.
Yes.
Councilmember Painter.
Yes.
Councilmember Carrillo.
Yes.
Councilmember Black.
Yes.
Councilmember Crable.
Yes.
Councilmember Bray.
Yes.
Okay, we got a new lease on life here, although we've pretty much come close to using up that time already. But Councilmember Bray.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And I'd like to focus us back on the presentation of this evening in regards to the building code updates. And in particular, I state that I'm supportive of these updates and I appreciate these recommendations. However, I do have a couple of questions in relation to the 2018 IFC and the section in regards to the fire sprinklers to this group A2 occupancies where the alcoholic beverages are consumed and the occupant load is 300 or more. We've heard here this evening that there's been some, I guess, discussion among some in the community about removing that requirement. So I just would like some clarity. Have we heard, do we know what the position of fire protective services are in regards to deleting this requirement for sprinkler systems for buildings that have these kinds of gatherings?
Yeah, we did discuss this matter with the fire chief and the fire department. They're aware of this and they're supportive of this present deletion based on our current times.
So thank you for that.
And their response to that was also our fire response times to those downtown entertainment oriented businesses. And some of the prior work that, I'll explain it this way. Under the old codes, each individual business did what was required of them to meet the current codes. And whether that's means of egress, fire protection between each element of the building, essentially was it the current code or the old code? The current code required fire separation for square footages greater than 5,000 square feet. And many of these businesses were able to separate their individual businesses into that meeting those threshold requirements. So I believe that we're comfortable with the present code, but Chris may have some additional comments on that. But I don't know if I'm answering your question on that, but we did reach out to the fire department and they were comfortable with deleting that section at this time.
Well, I guess I'd like more detail on that
Okay.
piece because I'd like to understand what it means that they're comfortable, because I'd like to hear from our fire membership, our union, to understand how they feel about this, because when we talk about a venue that holds more than 300 people and a fire occurring there, where life and limb of not only the occupants, but now our fire services may come into issue, I'd really like us to have some more conversation about that piece and just focus in on if there are 13, focus in on those buildings affected. So I think I heard you say there are 13 businesses. So I'd like to understand more about how it's okay and how it'll be safe for people to attend things in these areas, and how it will be safe for our fire services that have to respond. Because I know there was a discussion, or you set out here 3 different options to adopt to the code, including that requirement. Or a second option you made mention of was to talk about a 2024 adoption. In other words, some time to incorporate these changes, or to delete it entirely. And what you've spoken here tonight is about deleting entirety. I'd like to explore option number 2 more for a 2024, and or have some better understanding about what it means for these 13 businesses and these 13 venues if we don't go forward with this kind of requirement that is part of the International Fire Code. My last thought is this: it's very horrific when we hear of communities that are affected by fires in these kinds of venues, and the loss of life and is tragic. And I would never want Bloomington to be one of those places. And so I just like to have, and I know no one would, I understand that, but I just like to have some more clarity around what we are going to do with these 13 venues if we're not going to have the sprinkler system requirement. So thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you. And at this point, Councilmember Black, are you quick? Because we're off over again, but you have I see you had your hand up now.
Very quick. Yeah. Great conversation. I'll just add that, when we talk about these types of changes, the robust public comment process is going to be key. So I know this is probably going to get a news cycle. I know that went through Property Maintenance Review Board, but hearing from the folks that Kim talked about, Jen talked about, weighing in on these changes before making a final decision, I think is going to be critical for everyone to feel like they were part of the process.
Okay, actually, I have another council member who's had their hand up. Can we extend this by another, because we're really.
Motion to extend by 10 minutes.
Second.
10 minutes?
Second.
Okay, Councilmember Mathey, second by Councilmember Carrillo. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Mathey,
Yes.
Councilmember Bolin,
Yes.
Councilmember Millawamble,
Yes.
Councilmember Emig,
Yes.
Councilmember Painter,
Yes.
Councilmember Carrillo,
Yes.
Councilmember Black,
Yes.
Councilmember Crable,
Yes.
Councilmember Bray.
Yes.
Okay, Councilmember Mathey, you have the floor.
Yeah, and I just wanted to comment. I think that Kim's comments are spot on, that we want to make sure that we're doing everything we possibly can to protect folks as well. I don't know if everybody got a chance to read the email that came in as part of public comment from the VFW earlier today, but just to put it out there that they said they got estimates based on our September 3rd notice to them about this conversation, that it was going to cost $150,000 to retrofit their building. So I think as part of this conversation, we just also need to acknowledge that even if we give a 3-year time frame of, like, let's say a 2024 time frame to do this, the cost of putting in a sprinkler fitting and retrofitting it into a building is exorbitant. And it very well could put some of these business out of business or make some of these locations no longer be functional for what they've been. So places that I'd be concerned about be the VFW or Knights of Columbus or those type of organizations where they're essentially fraternal organizations that are run by nonprofits. So we just also need to keep that in mind and just be careful before making sweeping generalizations. So let's just be aware there's two sides to every conversation.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Okay, I see Councilmember Bray, you have your hand up again. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I guess part of that conversation, I mean, it's a great point. I mean, we want robust activities and robust interactions. We're not trying to close anybody down for sure. I mean, maybe if someone isn't going to install these, then perhaps they have an attendance of 299 instead of 300 at an event. But beyond that, I wonder, as part of our look at this, are there grants available for those kinds of entities? Especially you think of a VFW or other kinds of charity organizations, would there be a grant available to get this kind of installation done? I don't know if staff knows about that, or maybe that's something we could explore in the future.
We can explore that in the future. I will say this, that the numbers for the VFW seem kind of high. Our research is showing between $5 and $7 a square foot for retroactive installation. So if you're talking about a 5,000 square foot building, you're talking in that, I'd say 25 to 35 range. So we can work on that. And Alderperson Bray also made mention of the, I lost my chain of thought, but the ability to,
Grants.
yeah, on the grants. I'm not familiar with specific grants on these types of things. Oftentimes it would be maybe the city or incentivizing these types of things, but that's something that we could continue to discuss.
Okay. Thank you. And now, Councilmember Carrillo, you have a retort or a rebound?
Yeah, as we're talking about the sprinkler system, I think that's the case for the come together space on Roosevelt over in my ward. But I think it was a similar situation where they were holding cultural events and shows and using it as a venue, but then couldn't afford to install the sprinkler system, which is thousands and thousands of dollars. And then now that community space no longer exists for people. And so totally agree with Councilmember Bray that we should be looking out for folks' safety. But yeah, also agree with Jamie that sometimes these things have unintended consequences, particularly when folks are not able to afford to make the changes that are now dictated by code. I don't think it's that anybody doesn't want to make those changes, but I think affordability is an issue. So whatever we can do to look into grants and financial supports to help folks make those transitions, I think would be important for us to prioritize.
Great. Thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Mart and all your staff for all the work you've been doing. We appreciate all your help. At this point, we're going to move on to item B, and this is discussion regarding a program on art on the public right-of-way. And I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Gleason. I guess Mr. Tyus, you have a brief presentation, correct?
Thanks, Mayor and Council.
Thank you.
Deputy City Manager Tyus is going to present on this, but I wanted to share with opening remarks. This topic has been something that's been discussed in this community for several years. And for the last year and a half, this is something that we've been working on. Billy's run the lead on this. We had planned on having something this spring, but I'll say COVID got in the way. Here's some names that I'm going to share that truly have a passion and are champions of this. Number one on the list is Herb and Pam Eaton. Former Alderwoman Diana Howman and her husband Dave, and then also the Tiltons, Tim and Vicky. And I realize that there's others, but definitely have been those that have been very active in this conversation. And this is a presentation tonight If we get a thumbs up from council, this could be an agenda item next week on September 28th. Billy?
Thank you, Tim. Mayor, members of council, actually, Tim hit the nail on the head in that this has been a discussion for quite some time in this community, even before I got here. And part of the reason I think is because art can be difficult. It can be subjective. It's you know, what's good and what's not. It depends on who you ask. And so one of the things that we've talked about is how do we come up with a process that is fair, that is non-bureaucratic, and that allows for the support of art in our community. As you know, Bloomington has a very active artist community and a number of talented and award-winning artists, a number of venues for displaying art. But again, how do you harness that into a program that is you know, allows for support of that? So what we have done, we've talked to a number of those entities that Tim mentioned and others. We've talked with you over time, and what we're proposing is a framework that could help support this. I want to be clear, this program that we're talking about tonight is for art on public property, and that's municipal land and facilities, that's potentially sidewalk art, that's potentially arts in the parks, you know, murals on city property. We did a mural program last year in partnership with some folks. You know, there are some communities that are doing some really interesting things. There are some that have done things like Paint the Plows program. So how do we support that myriad of programs in our community? And so in concept, what we would propose is the creation of a review committee that, you know, each year issues a request for artist submittals or multiple requests for artist submittals. Typically that's called a call to artists. So for example, maybe this committee, which I'll talk a little bit about later, says, you know, in the first quarter, we want to do a sculpture. We're doing a request for proposals to the artist community. You could either limit it to local or you could do it nationally, you know, to submit your proposals to us. And that would be based on a specific set of criteria. We would get those submittals. This committee would accept those proposals and review them and make a recommendation based on, again, pre-established criteria to the city council for a final decision. I think that having a review group is important for a couple of reasons. It gives an added level of transparency, and it also gives important public input to this process. I think that it eliminates putting you, frankly, or staff in a position where we're saying, yes, I like this one, but no, I don't like this one. And, you know, again, art is subjective. And so it takes us out of that. The other thing it does is that if we're doing this based on a set of pre-established criteria, it eliminates the whole argument that some people will make that you're selecting this because you know this person, or Billy, you're selecting that because I know this person, or whatever. So having this committee helps with that. Okay. One of the things that we're recommending is that this committee be made up of 2 members of the beautification committee, 2 members of the cultural commission, and 3 members of the public. Again, the odd number helps with voting, and also, you know, having that range of folks gives a variety of perspectives and input to the process. And so conceptually, again, it's review committee. You've heard our recommendations for how it be made up. Obviously, we're open to that, to your suggestions. And the other thing I want to say is that there are a number of cities who are handling public art in much the same way as what we've proposed tonight. Evanston does it very similarly. Urbana does it. Elgin does it similarly. Aurora does it. I know that Peoria has a sculpture walk program where they do it very similarly to this as well. And so we're not reinventing the wheel. This is how a lot of cities are doing this. One of the things that has come up as part of the conversation is, you know, in the event that the city takes on a program like this, you know, is there an opportunity for us to fund it, to have skin in the game, for lack of a better way to say it? And I think there are a number of opportunities for possibly doing that in the event that you want to. Obviously, not obviously, I believe that part of this may involve some private fundraising. And I do know that there are groups out there who would be willing to commit money to something like this. Excuse me. I know that there are lots of pressures on our revenues today, all things considered, but many, if not most cities also contribute a portion of general fund revenues as well. We're not necessarily talking about a large contribution, but that's a possibility as well. We talked a little bit about what is currently known as a parkland dedication fee, where there's a fee that's already collected as per city code from developers in lieu of land dedications, or can be in lieu of land dedications for new parks and recreation space. So when there's a new development, is there a possibility here to utilize a portion of those funds for maybe an Arts in the Park program, whereby we're encouraged, say a subdivision comes about and we utilize, if possible, a portion of that parkland dedication fee to say, okay, you're contributing this money. There's a park near this new subdivision. Maybe we have an Arts in the Park program where you're encouraging arts in these parks. You're encouraging people who may not necessarily always participate in the arts to be introduced to it within a park setting. There are some benefits to doing that if we're able to do that. And finally, probably one of the more popular, frankly, concepts for funding is what folks are calling a percent for art fee, where cities and towns and even the state of Illinois and the federal government, they currently set aside a percent of each public construction budget for art in the project. A lot of times that's 1/2 of 1% to 1%. The concept is that art helps offset or beautify the installation of hard infrastructure. So while we love our streets, while we love our sewers, the building of that, it's hardscape and it's not always pretty, frankly. And so, is there an opportunity to, attach a fee to that type of work that goes into beautifying our community? And so those are possibilities for funding as well. Again, as I said, the state of Illinois currently does that. They have an art and architecture program where they contribute with the Capital Development Board, reserves 1/2 of 1% for the construction costs of state or building or renovation projects. City of Chicago obviously does. A number of other cities do as well. I think I read that actually 28 states currently have some type of similar percent for art fee. And so really what we wanted to do tonight, I know we've talked a little bit about this before, is to introduce the concept to you, see if you have any questions, and see if in concept you would be comfortable with a framework like this, being review group, call to artists, that group reviews, provides you with a recommendation. That's generally the concept. Just to see if you have any thoughts on any of that. And with that, we'll take questions if you have any.
Questions would start with Councilmember Carrillo and then Matthew. I see in that order.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for doing all the legwork on this. I think this is super critical to our community identity. Like, I think people tend to put art in sort of a bucket where that's like the bonus and the extra. But I actually think that art in our community spaces is the type of stuff that brings people together in a way that like we need now more than ever. So I guess, and Billy, I think you and I have talked about this, but one thing that is important to me is, and that I would like to see as a part of this framework is the idea of some rotating members of this committee, because while we want to take an approach as a whole city, I do think that there are things that are like more appropriate in certain neighborhoods than other. And I think people who actually reside in the places where the art will be up should get to weigh in to this process. So for example, like what's available out where Jeff lives, or what gets the art that gets approved out where Jeff lives shouldn't be, I don't think, the same as the art that works in my neighborhood. And I actually think that is how people build like neighborhood pride and neighborhood identity. And I think our city is just big enough that people do actually identify with their specific neighborhoods. So I guess that would be my one ask, and my one addition would be that as you are considering those like 3 members of the public, like can we maybe have those 3 rotate on a case-by-case basis? So like if someone is submitting a proposal for our work on the west side, I would really want to make sure that those 3 people making those decisions are folks who reside on the west side and are gonna like live with that piece of art, and we want to make sure that it's art that reflects our identity as West Siders, which I think actually is a way to involve community and help them feel ownership over these projects. And I also think that like we should have skin in the game, and I do see this as one of the critical functions of the city, and we should fund it, or at a minimum help secure, like be good partners in helping to secure the funding for this, because it shouldn't just be that people who can afford the art, who can afford the project or who have the connections to make a project happen are the people who get to put art in our public spaces. So I don't think it's just a matter of like, nobody likes to spend money, but it's a matter of equity. So like if we can actually help finance the art, I think that actually gives people a more equal shot at making the city theirs in this way.
Thank you. Councilmember Matthey, Bray, and Craybill in that order as I see them. Councilmember Matthey?
Thanks, Mayor. I just had the idea that we should put Scott Black in charge of all this because he's going to have some free time. So
the United Way Committee too.
No, Billy, I just wanted to say thank you for this. I know that right after you got here, it was one of the things that I was hitting you up about, and it's pushing to make sure that this kept moving forward. When I was on the Cultural Commission, we actually tried to identify all of the public art that we could find around town. And it's actually all in the core of the city. There's not really anything we could identify on the west side or the east side. It's actually all pretty much in the core. And we started looking at it. We're like, well, why? Why is there nothing on the east side in any of the parks? Why is there nothing on the west side in any, everything, with the exception of Miller Park, everything else seems to be very centrally located right in the core. So I think this is a great program, and I really appreciate you bringing it forward, and I look forward to supporting it.
Great. Councilmember Bray, and then Craybill and Emig.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you so much, Billy, for your work on this. I'm very supportive of this. I would say that I'm very interested in seeing consistency in the approach. I would like us to use this to take a serious look at identification of who the city of Bloomington is overall. And let's have an opportunity to identify and who we are as a city. Rather than taking a segregated approach or highlighting differences, I would prefer to see us think about identifying our commonalities and creating a sense of community around this art. So so in that regard, I think that would probably lead to greater consistency in those that serve, so that we can execute on that concept. So that would be my input on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember, again, Craybill, Emig, and Carrillo.
Thank you, Mayor. One thing I wanted to add, I certainly agree with the importance of public art, and I've talked to Herb and Pam a number of times on this as well. And thank you for Billy for bringing this to the point that it is after 20 years. So, but I think we also have to remember when I was on the Cultural Commission, we were also talking about how we can, publicize our art, right? And get it out to other communities, so it could be a tourist attraction, right? Secondly, it also helps in economic development, right? So businesses that are wanting to move here, they're going to look at our arts and culture as well as other things to see, is this a place that we want to put our business, that our employees are going to want to move to? I would say that, I agree with both alderpersons, Jen and Bray. I think we both have to have art that is potentially, fits into, a certain side of town, as well as having art that fits everyone. A couple of questions or maybe points I wanted to make is, I know it could be a conflict of interest, but have we thought about having artists on the committee to give kind of a background on the art that's being considered, for instance. Also, there may be art, like I've seen some art in Herb's studio that is like already done. So we wouldn't necessarily have to, we probably want to pay for that, but this is stuff that may already be done. And I guess my thought on public funding is I don't know how much money that we're getting now from park dedications. I don't know how much often that happens, or same thing with public construction projects, but maybe we can put in some seed money and then look to add, those other things, that'll hopefully add to that fund as the years go by. But I am fully supportive. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Emig, and then Carrillo and Bolin.
Thank you. Great presentation. I'm really excited about this and what can come of it. I think that arts, at least for me anyway, can save a life. And it's nice to see that we have some guidelines in place. My suggestion would be to think about those guidelines as a process for incorporating points of view. So if the committee is reviewing a potential project proposal or a series of proposals, there might be a way to incorporate feedback from the community or parts of the community where that would be implemented. So it's happening in a systematic, unified way with opportunities for input. And I also am in favor of looking at ways to fund this through something like an arts land dedication fee or percentage for art fee set aside in construction. And there are an awful lot of grants available for these kinds of projects. So in terms of Jeff's idea about seed money, I think we can probably find some grant funding to do this. So thank you. I'm excited.
Thank you, Julie. Appreciate that. Councilman, I'm going to go actually do, because starting with people who have not spoken yet on this topic, I'm going to start with Councilmember Bolin and then Carrillo. Councilmember Bolin.
Yeah, thank you, Billy. We've had some discussions about this, and I just want to get back to the point that this is going to be placed on public property. So when we get into location, we have to consider either downtown, like Alderman Matthews said, or in the parks that are out in the periphery. I mean, that's how I'm viewing it. So I like your process that you set up. I personally prefer using the dedication fee, and let me explain why. That would be considered private investment because it's coming from the developer. If we use construction money or added tax money, or however you want to call it, that's coming from the taxpayers, which you can say, okay, it doesn't really matter. But I prefer to have private investment heavily involved in this, not just public dollars. So that's where I'm going on that. And you said something about the fee for construction. Could you explain, would that be construction of a building or just construction for sewers and streets and all that?
Sure. If we could define that any way we wanted to, frankly. So for example,
Okay.
we could say, in the categories of capital improvements, right, plus our road work, plus water, plus sewer, plus storm, next year we're going to do upwards of $28 million. That's going to change based on COVID, obviously, but we budgeted for that. So say you did 0.5% of that number. If we did that much work, you're talking about $140,000 for funding. And so, we could define that as we wanted, frankly, but to give you an idea, that's the amount of work that we budgeted for next year in those categories of construction that are really not limited by some rules that won't allow us to use it. The other thing I wanted to say related to the parkland dedication fee, Jeff and I have talked a lot about this, and I think that probably becomes a portion of funding if we're able to do it. And here's what I mean. State law is pretty specific about, you know, you have to use these impact fees for projects that are for uses that are directly impacted by a development. And so maybe that becomes a means for funding art in a park, like you said, where, you know, if we're able to do that, frankly. So maybe it becomes a subdivision comes into town and they contribute this parkland dedication fee. And, you know, there's a park that's neighboring the subdivision. Maybe it becomes, again, Arts in the Park, where we're doing arts that, again, introducing people to art who may or may not, frankly, otherwise have access to art or something like that.
Okay. So then the park dedication fee could also be used maybe as seed money?
We have to be careful with it. And actually, we're
Okay.
learning more and more about that as we,
Okay.
Jeff and I talked a lot about it today, and I see he's smiling because I was trying to twist his arm.
Those laws get in the way, sorry.
But no, so there are possibilities, absolutely, but we're still working through that.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Carrillo and then Milawambwe. And then if we're going to do anything else, we're going to have to extend time because we've.
Let Councilmember Milawambwe go first.
Okay, oh, that's right. Yes, thank you. Councilmember Milawambwe and then Councilmember Carrillo. Mboka?
Thank you. I walked away for a second, then took me by surprise. So let me step back. So first of all, Billy, thank you very much for putting some structure to this process. I know it's very easy to get excited about art, but I think if we don't have a process and structure, things can go wrong very quickly. And speaking of that, you know, one of the things that I have been, that's been on my mind because I've seen it happen before, is that what happens when we put something on a building and then all of a sudden the building has to be demolished and you have people who are already attached to the art. It makes the situation very difficult. So I'm hoping that there will be not only a process to address that, but also a lot of thought ahead of time so that it doesn't happen. I mean, I know of certain situations that have happened here in town that I will not speak of, but it just was not a very, very pleasant situation to have to go through. And also, I wanted to reiterate this idea of economic development. I think, you know, oftentimes, you know, I'm all for stuff in the neighborhoods. That's great. But I also would want us to think big and really put things together, you know, having a theme so that it doesn't appear to be things that are disjointed, you know, here, something in this park and in that park, and then there's really no theme to it. But I think, you know, we have to kind of get into the habit of packaging things together so that, you know, anyone coming from the outside, you know, would be clearly interested in seeing this whole theme that has developed, as opposed to, you know, nobody will come here for a statue, one statue, you know, but they would come for an idea, the theme that would have been developed. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Carrillo.
Yes. So yeah, I just wanted to piggyback off of that and really just say that I do think that we can reach a good balance between a whole city identity approach and a neighborhood pride approach. But I think that the reality, though, to respond a little bit to Councilmember Bray's comments, is that we already live in a community that's segregated because of historic factors like redlining, which none of us had anything to do with, but that is the reality of our community. And so, let's be clear here that we aren't creating segregation by actually acknowledging the fact that our city is different for different people in different neighborhoods. I'm just suggesting that we actually acknowledge the fact that, for instance, Scott and I represent the parts of town with the highest concentration of people of color. And so, with all due respect to Councilmember Bray, who represents a predominantly white constituency, ethnic, cultural, and racial representation may not be the highest priority in those parts of town, but they certainly are a high priority for those of us who reside in these neighborhoods. And so I do think that, again, having some rotating committee members would give us that balance, right? Because we'd have some members of this new committee that would be members of existing committees that are looking at a whole city approach. And then, whatever those 3 or 2 or whatever we decide, rotating members of the public that are selected upon the geography of the project that we're looking at could give us some of that neighborhood pride perspective. And so I think that would be a really nice balance.
Councilmember Bray, and then this is our last comment. Kim, you got the last words.
Oh, well, thank you, Mayor. And again, I see this project as something that can bring our community together and underscore who we are in our common lives. I reject notions that only certain sections of town value diversity or in fact display diversity, and would encourage everyone to come forward in a way that we collaborate and again, create a sense of community that identifies who we are as the city of Bloomington. And let's focus on that commonality rather than tear our community asunder by constantly focusing on those things that bring us into conflict and segregate us and separate us. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. At this point, I'm going to turn this over for up to 5 minutes for our city manager, Mr. Gleason. You have a report for us.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I have some city manager comments, and I did have a couple of COVID comments, but I'll move quickly. Phil, if you would put the first slide in. Just a reminder that downtown Bloomington Farmers Market, 7:30 to 12 on Saturday. Next slide, I believe, is the census. And a reminder, I noticed everybody had shirts on last week. Looked very nice. There's still time. And we have done very well as a community and as a region, but there's still numbers to be had, and they do count. Next item is Small Business Assistance Grant Program. Just try to push this message out to the community, to that business community. To take advantage of this, apply. Will help as much as we need to get this money into the hands of small business throughout the community. Another item that I wanted to share, I don't think it started today, but it will sometime this week, is the demolition of O'Neill Pool. So that's coming up. And again, I don't think it started today, but I do know that it will start this week. On to a couple of quick COVID related comments. One, just wanted to share a quick employee update. Haven't said that in a little bit. So wanted to share that we have had some COVID positives of the employees. We've had some COVID positives within the family unit that have required employee quarantine. And we still are in this position that I've described in the past, where we're able to be extra precautionary to protect that workforce, because we have not seen too many COVID positives or direct exposures to COVID positives. So just wanted to provide that quick update to the community. And then the second item that I wanted to share was the obvious that we see in the news, that we're off the watch list as McLean County, and the numbers are trending downward. And honestly, while the communities in the region might have handled this, in their own way that best met the needs of that community, this council, I think, deserves credit, and I'm hearing from the business community deep appreciation that we dealt with this as a case by case versus a blanket policy that would have impacted potentially negatively the entire business community. So we started messaging, 3 or 4 weeks ago through some of the elected officials, through media releases, and that direct communication to the establishments, that was key. We also knew that regardless of what we were doing, we had a wait period of about 14 days to see the impacts of whatever action we were taking. And very happy to say that we've seen compliance, even though our enforcement checks through the Bloomington Police Department still are very much a priority and will be, until further notice. But we're seeing the positive effects of things that we set in motion 3 or 4 weeks ago. And with that, that's all I've got, Mayor and Council. Thank you very much.
Now, I just want to say thank you, Tim, for all you've done and working with the chief in terms of aggressive enforcement and with legal. Obviously, we've still got quite a few cases and incidents of businesses that we want to make sure are fully in compliance, and they understand that we're serious. We may be beyond the spike, but that doesn't mean that we must not continue to be vigilant. So I just want to thank you so much for all your work, and thank this council and others for moving forward. At this point, I'm going to use the chair's discretion to give the floor very briefly to one of our distinguished colleagues who has worked in public service, elective office since puberty, and that's Councilmember Black.
Thank you, Jerry. Thanks, Tim. So you guys have probably heard a couple.
Before puberty, wasn't it?
Oh my God, this guy. Yeah, since I was 21. So yeah.
3 weeks ago.
Yes.
I'm kidding.
Well, yes, you've heard a couple
I'm
of.
sorry. This
Oh,
is your
you're fine.
moment. I'm shutting up. I'm honestly okay.
All right, let the record show Terry is being quiet. I shared this with the council this morning. You've heard a couple of jokes this evening about it, but I wanted to share some information with the public. So this week I'm putting my house on the market because last week my beautiful wife Hollis and I put an offer on a new house, which was accepted. This new home is not within the boundaries of Ward 7. So I will need to announce that I'm intending to resign my seat towards the end of October. Don't worry, I will still be in West Bloomington though. I had hoped to finish up my term, but this home is a tremendous opportunity for my family, literally exceeding all the things that Hollis and I wanted in our dream home. Life is about seizing opportunities, so we are both pretty pumped. The final resignation date will be determined on a few things, but I figure it's better to share this information as the home buying process unfolds. But don't expect me to cruise to my last day. I'm going to keep at it and wrap up a few things in these next few weeks here. In fact, took some constituent calls today and will continue that through my last day of service. It's been an absolute honor to serve on the council and represent Ward 7 these past nearly 8 years. More to come, and I'm sure I'll have more to say later, but thanks, Terry, for allowing me the opportunity to share this information this evening.
Thank you. Thank you, Scott. We really appreciate all the work you've done and your great service to our community and obviously Ward 7. Thank you so much. And it's bittersweet. I know the house you're buying, that's awesome. And I also, obviously we all wish you well.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. At this point, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Carrillo. Is there a second?
Second.
Councilmember Bray. All in favor, oh, excuse me. Yeah, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Excuse me. Sorry.
Aye.
Anybody opposed can stay on. Thank you. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Bye-bye. Good
Congratulations,
night.
Scott, dude.
Thanks, everyone.
All right.